They swore an oath to protect and serve. They carried badges, wore uniforms, and communities trusted them with their lives. But 3 female police officers betrayed everything that badge represented. They became cold-blooded killers. Today, we're exposing 3 shocking cases of corrupt cops who committed murder. An execution-style triple homicide where an officer gunned down her own partner for cash. A calculated killing where a former cop buried her victim's body in concrete, thinking her forensic training would help her escape. And a case that went ice cold for over 30 years until DNA from a single bite mark finally brought a decorated detective to justice. One of these women sits on death row right now, the only woman awaiting execution in her entire state. The others are locked away for life. Cell phone data and cutting-edge DNA technology ultimately caught them all. Before we dive in, drop a comment, where are you watching from and what time is it right now? Let's start with the most violent case, a cop who murdered her own partner in an armed robbery gone horribly wrong. 1. Antoinette Frank. Antoinette Frank.
This is not fair. We want the truth, the whole truth, and
In 1995, Frank was convicted
Frank, a New Orleans Police Department officer who was just 24 years old when she committed one of the most shocking crimes in NOPD history. Here's what makes this even more disturbing. Antoinette was hired despite failing her psychological evaluation. The department was desperate for officers in the early 90s, so they lowered their standards and let her slip through. She had a documented history of lying, manipulation, and serious financial problems. Her partner was Officer Ronald Ronnie Williams II, a good cop who trusted her completely. What he didn't know was that Antoinette had a boyfriend named Rogers Lacaze, an 18-year-old drug dealer. She also worked security at a Vietnamese restaurant called Kim An. That side job would become the scene of an absolute nightmare because Antoinette planned to rob the very place she was supposed to be protecting. Now, the victims in this case make the betrayal even more heartbreaking. Officer Ronald Ronnie Williams II was 25 years old, Antoinette's partner on the force, and he also worked security at Kim An restaurant. He trusted her as both a colleague and a friend. She shot him with his own gun. Think about that level of betrayal for a second. Then there were Ha Vu, who was just 17 years old, and her brother Quang Vu, who was 24. These siblings ran the restaurant, and they'd hired Antoinette as their security guard. They trusted her to keep them safe. Instead, she shot them execution style to eliminate any witnesses. But there was a survivor, Xiao Vu, another sister who managed to hide in a walk-in cooler while the murders happened. She witnessed everything, and her testimony would ultimately be the key to convicting Antoinette. So here's how the nightmare unfolded. On March 4th, around 2 in the morning, Antoinette and her boyfriend Lacaze entered Kim An restaurant after it had closed for the night. Officer Ronnie Williams was there working his security shift. Antoinette shot her own partner with his service weapon. Just let that sink in for a moment. Then she and Lacaze hunted down the Vu siblings throughout the restaurant and executed them. They stole money and fled. But Antoinette didn't stop there. She actually returned to the scene later, this time acting as a responding officer. She pretended to discover the bodies, played the shocked cop, and gave false statements to investigators. She thought she could use her badge to cover up what she'd done. The whole plan started unraveling fast though. Xiao Vu, the survivor, identified Antoinette as the shooter. Forensic evidence completely contradicted her story. Then Lacaze confessed and implicated her. The evidence against her was overwhelming. Antoinette was arrested in March 1995, just days after the murders. Her trial happened quickly. By September 1995, she was convicted on all counts and sentenced to death. Now, here's the part that might shock you. She's been sitting on death row at the Louisiana Correctional Institute for Women for nearly 30 years now. She's the only woman on Louisiana's death row. Her accomplice, Rogers Lacaze, was executed by lethal injection back in 2010. He maintained until the end that Antoinette was the shooter. Antoinette has filed multiple appeals over the years, but every single one has been denied. She's still there, waiting. The reaction to this case was massive. The New Orleans Police Department was absolutely devastated. Officer Williams was beloved by his fellow officers, and the fact that his own partner killed him sent shockwaves through the department. There was also a huge scandal about how Antoinette had been hired in the first place despite failing her psychological evaluation. The Williams family was heartbroken, dealing not just with his death, but with the betrayal of someone he trusted. The Vu family lost 2 members to pure greed. The Vietnamese community in New Orleans felt betrayed. This immigrant family was working hard, running their business, and they hired a police officer to protect them. Instead, she murdered them. The case got national attention, and there was widespread support for the death penalty in this particular case. One positive outcome was that it led to major reforms, stricter psychological evaluations, and better screening procedures for police recruits. The department learned the hard way that being desperate for officers can lead to hiring dangerous people. Antoinette Frank murdered her partner and 2 restaurant workers in a robbery fueled by greed. But our next corrupt cop had a different motive for murder, and she had a much more elaborate plan for hiding the body. We're talking about a former officer who literally buried her victim in concrete. 2. Ashley McArthur. Ashley McArthur was a former police officer from Pensacola, Florida, who transitioned into working as a crime scene technician. At 40 years old in 2017, she had extensive expertise in forensics and evidence disposal. Basically, she knew exactly how investigations worked and how to hide evidence. To the outside world, she appeared respectable. She was married with children and had a good reputation in her community. But beneath that surface, Ashley was desperately in debt and needed money. Here's where things get crucial. To understanding this crime, her husband owned a landscaping and concrete business. That detail would become absolutely central to how she tried to get away with murder. The victim was Taylor Wright, a 33-year-old private investigator who was also a former police officer. Taylor was going through a really difficult divorce with serious custody issues, and she was friends with Ashley. They both had law enforcement backgrounds, so there was an automatic bond there. Taylor trusted her completely. During her divorce proceedings, Taylor liquidated some assets and ended up with $34,000 in cash. She needed to hide this money from her estranged spouse, so she asked Ashley to hold it for safekeeping. That was the fatal mistake. Once Ashley had access to that cash, she made a cold calculation. She was drowning in debt, desperately needed money, and she had $34,000 sitting right in front of her. The only way to keep it? Kill Taylor. On September 8th, 2017, Ashley put her plan into action. She lured Taylor to a remote property in the Pensacola area and shot her in the back of the head with a .45 caliber gun. Taylor died instantly. Then came the cover-up, and this is where Ashley's law enforcement training came into play. She used her husband's landscaping equipment to dig a grave on the rural property. She buried Taylor's body in a shallow grave, then poured concrete over it, creating a slab that looked like it was just part of the undeveloped land. She thought her knowledge of forensics would help her get away with it. When Taylor was reported missing in September, Ashley was among the last people to see her alive. Investigators questioned her repeatedly, and she lied every single time, denying she knew where Taylor was or that she had Taylor's money. The breakthrough came from technology Ashley couldn't outsmart. Investigators subpoenaed her phone records, and the cell tower data placed her at the burial site at the exact time Taylor disappeared. Financial records showed something even more damning. Ashley had started spending Taylor's money almost immediately after the murder, using it to pay off her debts. In October 2017, just about 6 weeks after the murder, investigators brought cadaver dogs to search the property where the phone data had pinpointed her. The dogs alerted to an area covered in fresh concrete. They excavated the slab and found Taylor Wright's body underneath. Ashley was arrested in October 2017, shortly after they found the body. Her trial didn't happen until April 2019, and throughout the proceedings, she maintained her innocence. The prosecution presented the phone data placing her at the burial site, financial records proving she spent Taylor's money, ballistics evidence, and the fact that she had no alibi. The jury convicted her of first-degree murder, and the judge sentenced her to life in prison without the possibility of parole. She's currently incarcerated in Florida, and all of her appeals have been denied. The aggravating factors were clear. This was premeditated murder for financial gain. She betrayed a friend who trusted her, and she used her law enforcement knowledge to try covering up the crime. The The law enforcement community was shocked by how calculated this murder was. Here was a former officer who'd used her forensic training to try getting away with killing a friend. The LGBTQ+ community rallied around Taylor's memory. She was a lesbian who'd been going through a vulnerable time in her life, and her girlfriend was instrumental in pushing investigators to keep looking for her. The public was outraged that Ashley killed a friend over $34,000. What particularly disturbed people was the concrete burial. It seemed so cold and calculated. The case got massive national media coverage, especially on true crime shows. The private investigator community felt protective of Taylor's memory since she was one of their own. Legal experts pointed out how law enforcement training can actually make criminals more dangerous because they know how to hide evidence. But here's the irony: despite all her training, Ashley couldn't erase her digital footprint. Cell phone technology caught her. Ashley McArthur buried a body in concrete, thinking her forensic expertise would save her, but our final corrupt cop committed a murder that went completely cold for over 3 decades until DNA technology finally caught up with her lies. 3. Stephanie Lazarus.
I'm really shocked that somebody would be saying that I did this. I mean, we had a fight, so I went and killed her. I mean, come on.
Stephanie Lazarus was a Los Angeles Police Department detective, and her case is one of the most famous cold cases ever solved by DNA. She was 25 years old when she committed murder in 1986. Fast forward 23 years, and she was 49 when they finally arrested her in 2009. During those decades, she'd risen through the LAPD ranks, specializing in internal affairs and art theft. She was decorated with awards and commendations, respected by her colleagues. But she had a dark secret. She'd murdered a romantic rival back in 1986 and then continued building a successful police career for decades. The whole thing started with an obsession. Stephanie couldn't let go of her ex-boyfriend, and when he married someone else, she snapped. The victim was Sherry Rasmussen, a 29-year-old critical care nurse who was a newlywed. She had been married for just 3 months when she was killed. Here's the love triangle that led to murder. John Ruetten was an LAPD officer who became Sherry's husband, but he was also Stephanie's ex-boyfriend. Stephanie and John had dated on and off during college and afterward. For John, it was casual. For Stephanie, it was serious. When John broke things off and got engaged to Sherry, Stephanie became obsessed. Before the murder, she was essentially stalking them. She contacted John repeatedly, showed up at his workplace, even visited John and Sherry's home. She confronted Sherry directly about the marriage and warned her to stay away from John. Here's what's chilling: Sherry actually told her family that she was scared of John's ex-girlfriend, a cop. But those fears were dismissed. After all, she's a police officer. She wouldn't be dangerous, right? That assumption was fatal. On February 24th, during the daytime, while John was at work, Stephanie went to the couple's condo in Van Nuys. She confronted Sherry, and a violent struggle erupted throughout the home. During the fight, Stephanie bit Sherry, and that bite mark would become critical evidence 23 years later. Then Stephanie shot Sherry 3 times with a .38 caliber gun. To cover her tracks, she tried staging the scene to look like a burglary. She stole some electronics and even took Sherry's BMW briefly before abandoning it. The staging was sloppy, but initially, it worked. When LAPD investigated, they treated it as a burglary gone wrong, even though the evidence suggested Sherry knew her killer. Sherry's family told police repeatedly to look at John's ex-girlfriend, who was a cop, but those warnings were ignored. The case went cold because, quite frankly, police protected their own. Nobody wanted to suspect a fellow officer. Evidence pointing towards Stephanie was pushed aside, and the case was essentially buried. For 23 years, Sherry's family never gave up. They kept telling police to investigate Stephanie Lazarus, but they were ignored again and again. Meanwhile, Stephanie continued her career, got married herself, and lived a successful life. She thought she'd gotten away with murder. Then, in 2009, the LAPD Cold Case Unit reopened the investigation with fresh eyes. DNA technology had advanced dramatically since 1986. They tested DNA from the bite mark on Sherry's arm, but they needed Stephanie's DNA to compare it. They couldn't just ask her for a sample she might run. So they set up a sting operation. Detectives followed Stephanie and waited until she discarded something, a cup she'd been drinking from. They collected it, tested the DNA, and got a perfect match to the bite mark. In June 2009, they brought her in for questioning. She thought it was about a work matter. When they confronted her about Sherry's murder, she tried to downplay her relationship with John, claimed she barely remembered Sherry, and lied repeatedly. Then they arrested her. Stephanie's trial took place in February and March of 2012. Her defense tried arguing that the DNA evidence was contaminated and that there was no proof she killed Sherry. The prosecution presented the DNA match, evidence of her obsession with John, her access and opportunity, the fact that Sherry had warned her family about a threatening ex-girlfriend cop, the staged crime scene, and her lies during the interrogation. The jury convicted her of first-degree murder. She was sentenced to 27 years to life in prison. She's currently incarcerated at the California Institution for Women and will be eligible for parole in 2026 when she's 66 years old. This case became one of the most famous examples of DNA solving a cold case evidence. The LAPD faced a massive scandal. One of their own had murdered someone and gotten away with it for decades, and there were serious questions about whether the initial investigation had deliberately protected her. Sherry's family finally felt vindicated after 23 years of being ignored. Though the justice was bittersweet, Sherry's father had died before seeing the conviction. Her mother lived to see it. John Ruetten had to testify at trial and relive the trauma. He'd remarried and moved on with his life, only to be dragged back into this nightmare. The public was outraged that Stephanie had lived free for so long. The media coverage was enormous. Shows like 48 Hours and Dateline covered it extensively. The interrogation video of Stephanie lying to detectives went viral and is still studied today. The DNA and forensic community celebrated it as a major victory, showing how preserving evidence and advancing technology can eventually catch criminals. There's controversy now about her parole eligibility in 2026. Some people think she should die in prison. Others note she was 25 when she committed the crime. Legal experts continue to debate whether she'll actually serve her full sentence or be released. 3 corrupt cops, 3 murders, 3 complete betrayals of the badge. The motives were different. Antoinette Frank killed for greed, robbing a restaurant and murdering her partner plus 2 witnesses. Ashley McArthur killed her friend for $34,000. Stephanie Lazarus murdered out of jealous obsession over an ex-boyfriend's marriage. The victims trusted the wrong people. Officer Ronnie Williams killed by his partner, Ha Vu, 17, and Kwong Vu, 24, killed by their security guard. Taylor Wright, murdered by a trusted friend. Sherry Rasmussen, killed by her husband's jealous ex. The cover-up showed how dangerous cops can be as criminals. Frank pretended to discover bodies as a responding officer. McArthur buried a body in concrete using forensic knowledge. Lazarus staged a burglary while LAPD protected her for 23 years. Technology caught them all. Frank, survivor, witness, and evidence. McArthur, cell phone tower data. Lazarus, DNA from a 1,986 bite mark. These women swore to protect and serve. Instead, they became killers. Justice came, but trust was shattered. Which case shocked you most? Do you think Stephanie Lazarus should get parole in 2026? Should Antoinette Frank be executed? Where are you watching from, and what time is it? Drop your thoughts below, hit like, share, and subscribe. Thanks for watching.